Renata put her favorite shoes in a box on a Tuesday afternoon. Not because they were old, because by Tuesday afternoon, they no longer fit. And if you are watching this right now, before I say another word, I want you to do one thing. Press your thumb firmly into the flesh just above your ankle bone. Hold it there. Count slowly to 10. Take your thumb away and look at what it left. If you see an indentation, a small pit that takes more than a second or two to fill back in, this video is specifically for you. You have just performed a clinical test on your own body. And what that test just showed you is not a sock problem. It is not a standing all day problem. And in most people watching this right now, despite what the majority of adults over 60 have been told, it is not primarily a heart problem. A 2021 study published in PLOS One, drawing on National Institute on Aging data from nearly 20,000 Americans, found that 1 in 5 adults over 50 has chronic ankle or foot swelling. That number has held at 19 to 20% across every wave of surveillance from the year 2000 to 2016. 16 years. No meaningful decline, despite every advance in cardiovascular medicine. That number is not declining because most of those people are not being treated for the thing that is actually causing it. Tonight, when you lie down, the fluid sitting around your ankles is going to shift. It will move upward. It will put a quiet load on the right side of your heart. It will trigger your kidneys to release it as urine within 1 to 3 hours of you falling asleep. That is the specific mechanism behind the 2 a.m. bathroom trip that has been interrupting your sleep for months. And tomorrow, the accumulation starts again. The system responsible for clearing that fluid during the day is one that most clinical appointments, even thorough ones, have never had the time to explain to you. I want to explain it today. Before I do, and I mean this seriously, if your ankle swelling is new, or if it appeared suddenly over the last day or two, or if it is only in one leg, stop this video now and call your doctor or go to urgent care today. Sudden onset of unilateral swelling, one leg, not both, is a deep vein thrombosis until proven otherwise. That is a medical emergency that requires same-day evaluation. If your swelling comes with shortness of breath, chest tightness, or difficulty lying flat, stop watching and go to the emergency department. Those are signs of cardiac decompensation. If your swelling appeared or significantly worsened after starting a new medication, particularly a blood pressure drug called amlodipine, or another drug from the calcium channel blocker class, or a nerve pain medication called gabapentin or pregabalin, your first call is to the prescribing physician. Those medications cause ankle swelling in a significant number of people who take them, not by damaging the heart, but by dilating capillaries and increasing the rate at which fluid leaks into tissue. The solution is a medication review, not a lifestyle protocol. This video is for the person whose swelling is chronic, both legs, symmetrical, worse by late afternoon, present for months or years, already evaluated by a doctor who found nothing wrong with the heart, the kidneys, or the liver. If that is you, keep watching. Everything I am about to say is specifically for your situation. Here is what the standard clinical encounter gets right, and where it stops. A thorough doctor evaluating chronic ankle swelling will do exactly what your doctor probably did. They will measure a cardiac marker called brain natriuretic peptide, which rises when the heart is under strain. They will run kidney and liver function tests. They may order an echocardiogram to look directly at how the heart is pumping. These are the right tests. When they come back normal, the doctor correctly concludes, this is not heart failure, this is not renal failure, this is likely venous insufficiency or fluid retention related to general aging. That conclusion is correct as far as it goes. What it does not address is the second drainage network. Your body has 2 fluid return systems. You know the first one, the cardiovascular system, with the heart as its central pump, moving blood through arteries and veins. What most people do not know nearly as much about is the second, the lymphatic system, a network of vessels, collecting ducts and lymph nodes that runs in parallel with your veins, absorbing the excess fluid that leaks from your blood capillaries into the tissue spaces between your cells, and returning it to the bloodstream. The cardiovascular system gets assessed routinely. A BNP takes 4 hours to result. An echocardiogram takes 40 minutes. The lymphatic system, in a standard clinical appointment, is almost never formally assessed. Not because the doctor is negligent, because the bedside tools to measure lymphatic pump function quickly simply do not exist the way a blood test exists. The check for the second system was never built into the standard encounter. What this means in practice: for most people over 60 whose ankle swelling is chronic and bilateral, and whose cardiac markers are normal, the treatment being prescribed was built for the right problem in the wrong system. Diuretics pull water from the blood, from the vascular compartment, but the fluid pooled in your ankle tissue is not in your blood. It leaked from the blood into the interstitial space, the space between cells, and it stayed there because the lymphatic system could not drain it fast enough. You can slow the river that feeds a flooded field. That does not drain what has already pooled in the field. A 2021 umbrella review published in the NIH literature was explicit on this point. Prolonged diuretic use in older adults without confirmed fluid retention from cardiac, renal, or hepatic cause lacks substantial evidence for benefit and is associated with serious adverse events, including dangerously low blood sodium, potassium loss, dizziness, and falls. One of those adverse effects, urinary urgency, is worth pausing on. A medication prescribed for swelling that causes you to rush to the bathroom more frequently is a medication that is making you walk less than you would otherwise, which worsens the very drainage mechanism it was supposed to help. I want to tell you about Gerald before I explain the mechanism, because Gerald's story is one I have encountered in the research enough times to recognize as a pattern rather than an exception. Gerald is 73. He worked as a civil engineer for 34 years. When he retired 2 years ago, he moved into a smaller apartment, a third-floor condo, and the physical rhythm that had structured his working life simply stopped. He is not sedentary by intention. He reads, he works at his computer, he watches his grandchildren on video calls. It is simply that the natural movement of going to work every day, walking to his car, climbing stairs, moving between buildings, all of that is gone. About 18 months ago, Gerald noticed something small and strange. His wedding ring was getting tight by evening. Not dramatically, not painfully, but by 7 p.m., the ring he had worn for 40 years felt noticeably snug in a way it never had at 8 a.m. His right hand was visibly slightly larger than his left by the end of the day. He mentioned it to his doctor. His doctor ran a BNP, checked his kidneys and liver, ordered an echocardiogram. Ejection fraction, 61%. Excellent cardiac function. Normal metabolic panel. The doctor prescribed a low-dose diuretic. Gerald took it every morning for 14 months. The ring still got tight. Then, last spring, Gerald went on a fishing trip with his son. 2 days, 3 miles along a river path each day. Easy pace but continuous. He came home and his wife mentioned, without being prompted, that his hands looked different, lighter somehow. The ring had not been tight the entire trip. 3 miles of walking, no diuretic, normal fitting ring for 48 hours. Gerald had just discovered the mechanism in his own body without knowing what to call it. Every step he took along that river path was squeezing the pump that had been sitting idle in his condo for 2 years. We will come back to what that pump is. Most people over 60 with chronic ankle or lower limb swelling fall into one of 3 patterns, and it matters which one you are in. Pattern 1 is true cardiac edema. The heart is under sustained strain, pressure builds backward through the venous system, and fluid is pushed from the capillaries into surrounding tissue in larger volumes than the lymphatics can handle, even at full capacity. Brain natriuretic peptide is elevated. The echocardiogram often shows structural changes. For this pattern, diuretics are appropriate and often essential. If this is your pattern, what I am about to describe is a complement to your medical management, not a substitute for it. Pattern 2 is the pattern that accounts for the majority of chronic bilateral ankle swelling in otherwise healthy adults over 60. The cardiac workup is normal. The kidneys and liver are fine. But the lymphatic and venous return systems, particularly the lymphatic system, are not keeping pace with the daily fluid load. Fluid leaks from aging increasingly permeable capillaries into the tissue spaces faster than a compromised drainage network can clear it. It follows gravity and pools at the lowest available point. This is Gerald's pattern. This is Renata's pattern. Based on the epidemiology, it is almost certainly the most common pattern in the audience watching this. Pattern 3 is medication-induced. Calcium channel blockers, the most commonly prescribed is amlodipine, dilate peripheral capillaries as part of their mechanism, which increases the rate of fluid leakage into tissue. Gabapentin and pregabalin have similar effects. If your swelling appeared or substantially worsened within weeks of starting a new drug, that is the first conversation to have with your prescribing physician. The intervention is a medication review, and no protocol I describe today addresses that root cause. The lymphatic system was first described, and almost immediately forgotten, in 1622 by an Italian anatomist named Gaspare Aselli. He was performing a dissection in Milan and noticed a network of white, cord-like vessels in the abdomen that he had never seen described in any anatomy text. He cut one open. A milky liquid flowed out. He had discovered the lacteals, the beginning of what we now understand as the lymphatic system. The scientific community was briefly fascinated, then largely moved on. For nearly 3 centuries, the lymphatics were treated as a passive drainage ditch, a secondary pipe that moved waste out, not as the active pumping network we now know them to be. The modern understanding that lymphatic vessels contract rhythmically, driven by smooth muscle cells that are exquisitely sensitive to stretch and to chemical signals, only began to solidify in the second half of the 20th century. Here is what the lymphatic system actually does. Your blood capillaries are not perfectly sealed. A small, constant amount of protein-rich fluid leaks from them into the surrounding tissue. This is normal. It is part of how nutrients reach cells that are too far from a capillary wall to absorb them directly. Under normal conditions, the lymphatic system picks up this leaked fluid through hair-thin initial lymphatic capillaries just beneath the skin, moves it through progressively larger collecting vessels, and returns it to the bloodstream at a junction near the collarbone. The critical thing to understand, the thing that changes everything about what you have been told regarding why your ankles swell, is this. The lymphatic system has no heart. There is no central pump equivalent to the cardiac muscle beating in your chest. Blood moves because the heart beats. Lymph moves for a completely different reason. Imagine the collecting lymphatic vessels in your lower leg as a series of small, soft rubber squeeze bulb chambers, the kind used to clear a wound, with a one-way valve at each end so that when you compress the bulb, fluid moves forward, and when you release it, the valve snaps shut and nothing flows back. Your calf muscle is your hand. Every step you take compresses those chambers and ejects fluid upward through valve after valve, from ankle toward knee, toward thigh, toward the lymph nodes in the groin, and then back into circulation. Leave the bulbs unsqueezed for 6 unbroken hours of sitting, and nothing moves. The pump is off. The fluid that continues leaking from your capillaries into the tissue around your ankle has no active mechanism to clear it. Gravity wins. That is what happens every afternoon for most people in patterns 2. Now here is the second layer, the one that explains why this worsens specifically with age, even in people who are reasonably active. A 2015 study published in Aging Cell, a peer-reviewed journal from Wiley, compared aged and young lymphatic vessels at the ultrastructural level, the level of individual cells and proteins. What the researchers found was striking. In aged lymphatic vessels, the smooth muscle cells that generate the rhythmic contractions had reduced in number. The extracellular matrix that gives the vessels their structural integrity had degraded. The glycocalyx, a protective sugar protein coating on the inner vessel wall that acts as a selective barrier, had thinned, making the vessels more permeable. And the protein bridges that allow adjacent cells to communicate and contract in coordinated waves had been disrupted. A 2019 mechanistic review published in Aging, an NIH index journal, added the next piece. Aged lymphatic vessels also produce less nitric oxide, the molecular signal that regulates the phasic pumping cycle. Less nitric oxide means the contract-relax rhythm becomes irregular and less efficient. Research from Anatoly Gashev at the Texas A&M Health Science Center, funded by the National Institute on Aging, demonstrated directly that aged lymphatic vessels show measurably reduced contractile amplitude, reduced pumping frequency, and reduced net pump flow. Studies cited in the NIH literature found approximately a 60% reduction in lymph flow in aged animal models compared to young ones. That figure comes from animal studies. It cannot be applied with precision to a human being reading this, but the directional finding is consistent across multiple independent research groups. The lymphatic pump loses capacity with age. That decline is real, and it is measurable. Put those two things together, a structurally compromised lymphatic pump and a calf muscle that fires less often because we walk less than we did at 45, and you have the complete mechanism for why ankles that were fine at 55 are swollen every evening at 68. It is not a mystery. It is physics and biology intersecting in a predictable way. I want to go back to Renata now, because her story lands differently once you understand the mechanism. She is 71. She was a librarian for 32 years. When she retired, she moved from her house into an apartment in the same building as her sister. No garden, no stairs to the mailbox, an elevator. The city is walkable in principle, but she walks less than she did. She didn't notice the transition happening because it was gradual. The first real sign came at her daughter's birthday dinner 2 years ago. Renata reached across the table to open a jar, and her daughter said, "Mum, your ring finger looks swollen." Her right hand. Renata looked at it and thought it must be the angle of the light. In the car home, she held both hands up side by side. Her right hand was larger. By the time she was home and the overhead light was on, it was unmistakable. Over the next 6 months, the pattern became impossible to ignore. Ankles thick by 4 p.m., shoes uncomfortable by dinner. The ones she had worn to every family gathering for years, tan, low heel, a pair she had bought the year her daughter graduated, stopped fitting. She bought one wider size, then another. She went to her doctor. Full workup. BNP, normal. Metabolic panel, clean. Echocardiogram ordered. Ejection fraction, 64%. Excellent cardiac function. Her doctor prescribed a low-dose diuretic and advised reducing sodium. Renata did both. 8 months later, the shoes still didn't fit by 5 p.m. The clue came on a Sunday in October. Renata and her sister walked through the botanical gardens, about 4 kilometers over 2.5 hours, their usual pace, stopping occasionally to sit. Renata expected her feet to be at their worst by the time she got home. Instead, that evening, she told her daughter on the phone without thinking, "My feet feel almost normal today." Her daughter, who had been paying close attention for months, said, "Mum, that is not an accident. That is information." It was. 4 kilometers of walking meant the calf muscle pump had been running for 2.5 hours on a regular, sustained schedule it had not seen since before retirement. The fluid that would have pooled had been moved continuously. The rubber bulbs had been squeezed, valve after valve, all afternoon long. Renata started the protocol I am about to give you. At 2 weeks, her ankles were the same size at 8 p.m. as they had been at 8 a.m. The daily accumulation had stopped. At 4 weeks, the heaviness she had felt in her calves by midday, a sensation she had normalized so completely that she had forgotten it wasn't normal, had largely gone. At 6 weeks, she brought a box down from the top shelf of her closet. Her echocardiogram had not changed. Her BNP had not changed. Her prescriptions had not changed. The mechanism, the pump that had been waiting for its input, had simply been given what it needed to run. Before I give you the protocol, I want you to document where you are right now. Not a clinical grade scale, just 2 simple baseline observations that will become your evidence in 6 weeks. The first is the morning-evening comparison. Tomorrow morning, before you have been out of bed for 10 minutes, take a photograph of both bare ankles from the front. Note the definition of the Achilles tendon. Note the bony prominence at the inner ankle. Then take the same photograph at 7 p.m. Same distance, same angle, same lighting as best you can manage. Compare them side by side. If there is visible puffiness in the evening that was not there in the morning, if the tendon definition has softened, if the ankle bone is less visible, you are looking at your lymphatic system's daily deficit. That is your starting point. The second is the shoe test. Tomorrow morning, put on a pair of shoes that fit comfortably first thing. Note how they feel: lace tension, pressure at the instep, room at the ankle. Put the same shoes back on at 5 p.m. The same pair, not a different one. Notice the difference. That difference, the gap between the morning version and the evening version of the same shoe on the same foot, is a direct measure of how much fluid your drainage system failed to clear during the day. Write those 2 observations down, or keep the photographs. What I am about to give you changes both measurements, but only if you know what you are measuring from. If what you just described sounds like your daily life, if the morning ankle and the evening ankle feel like different bodies, and if you have been trying to explain this for more than a few months without a real answer, subscribe now, because what comes next is the protocol, and I do not want you to lose it before you have had a chance to use it. The protocol has 3 parts: morning, daytime, and evening. Each part targets a different aspect of the mechanism. I will give you the morning piece and the daytime piece first. Then I will explain something specific about the evening piece before I give it to you, because most people try to start with the evening routine and wonder why it is not working, and the reason is the sequence. The morning routine. Before you get out of bed, while you are still lying flat, before gravity has had any time to begin the day's accumulation, spend 2 minutes on ankle pumps. Flex each foot toward your shin, then point it away from you. 30 repetitions. Then rotate each ankle in a slow circle, 10 full rotations in each direction. You are starting the pump at the moment when lymphatic pressure is at its lowest point of the day. Moving lymph in the morning requires the least effort. You are working with the physiology rather than against it. Immediately after, when you stand up to make your morning drink, do calf raises. Feet hip-width apart, one hand on the counter for balance. Rise slowly onto your toes and lower slowly back. 3 sets of 15 repetitions. 30 seconds of actual work. This engages the full pump stroke, the large calf muscles contracting completely in the first 5 minutes of your upright day. A systematic review of exercise training in chronic venous disease published in PMC found measurable improvement in ejection fraction, ankle range of motion, and quality of life across multiple randomized controlled trials. The exercise that drives those outcomes is calf muscle activation. You are doing it before the fluid load of the day has begun. The daytime routine. The research on sedentary behavior is direct. Even a few hours of uninterrupted sitting is sufficient to produce measurable ankle edema in older adults with compromised lymphatic and venous reserve. The fix is not a longer walk. It is frequency. Every 45 to 60 minutes of sitting, stand up. Walk 20 steps. Do 2 minutes of ankle pumps at your desk or kitchen table. Walk to the window and back. Anything that fires the calf muscle pump. Short, frequent activation prevents accumulation rather than draining it after it has pooled. And that distinction matters more than total daily step count for this specific mechanism. Now, before the evening piece. The evening routine is the one that determines whether the fluid from your day drains properly or redistributes when you lie down. Here is the mechanism. The fluid that accumulates in your ankles throughout the day does not simply disappear when you lie flat at bedtime. It shifts upward along the venous system, increases the fluid load on the right side of your heart, and within 1 to 3 hours of lying down, the kidneys detect the increased venous return and release it as urine. That is the biological origin of the 2 a.m. bathroom trip. The evening protocol empties the reservoir before it can redistribute. But it only works if the morning and daytime components have already been running. If you sit without breaks all day and skip the morning activation, the evening session is trying to drain a tank that is significantly fuller than it needs to be through a pump that has been idle since you woke up. The sequence is not arbitrary. It follows the mechanism. The evening routine. Start between 6 and 7 p.m. before the accumulation has been sitting undisturbed for the full day. Step 1. Self-lymphatic drainage. Sit comfortably with your legs resting or lie down. Using the full flat of your palms, not your fingertips, make slow, deliberate sweeping strokes moving upward from ankle toward knee. The pressure is much lighter than you think it needs to be. Lymphatic capillaries sit just below the surface of the skin. Heavy pressure collapses them. You want gentle, sustained contact, a slow upward push, about 10 strokes per area, 15 seconds per leg. This is the technique taught to patients in complete decongestive therapy, the international standard of care for lymphedema, and a systematic review of 8 randomized controlled trials published in PMC found that most trials showed measurable volume reduction in edematous limbs, with no serious adverse events documented across the entire evidence base. It is safe for virtually everyone. The technical point that matters. Work from the groin downward first, thigh, then knee area, before you move to the lower leg. You are opening the drainage pathway before you push fluid into it. Think of clearing the sink drain before filling the sink. Proximal nodes first, then work from the ankle upward toward them. This sequence is what activates the lymph nodes at the groin to pull fluid upward rather than simply pushing it into a closed space. Step 2. Leg elevation. After the drainage, elevate both legs above the level of your heart. 2 or 3 firm pillows under the calves or a wedge cushion. You want approximately 30 to 45 degrees above horizontal. Stay there for 20 to 30 minutes. A study published in PubMed found a statistically near-perfect correlation, R equals negative 0.96, between the angle of leg elevation and the volume of fluid displaced from the lower limb. Laser Doppler studies confirm that 30 centimeters of foot elevation above heart level normalizes microcirculatory parameters in patients with venous insufficiency. Gravity has been working against your drainage system all day. This is 20 minutes of letting it work for you instead. One final piece, dietary sodium. Excess sodium in the diet drives the kidneys to retain water, increasing total circulating blood volume and raising the pressure at which fluid leaks from capillaries into tissue. The American Academy of Family Physicians, in their 2022 Peripheral Edema Evaluation Guidance, specifically identifies sufficient sodium restriction as an effective non-pharmacological measure for fluid management. You do not need to eliminate salt. Avoiding high-sodium processed foods, items with more than 600 milligrams per serving, and keeping total daily intake below 2,000 milligrams is the clinical target. It is not the primary lever, but it reduces the fluid load that the pump has to clear. Write your age in the comments, and then tell me, have you been given an explanation for your ankle swelling that never quite covered what you were actually experiencing? Have you taken a diuretic for months that helped a little, but not really, and assumed the leftover swelling was simply what aging felt like? I want to know how many of you got the same story Renata did. Not a number. Your story in your own words. Here is what I want you to understand before I close. Your lymphatic system did not fail. It was designed for a life that involved continuous, daily movement. Stairs climbed, errands walked, gardens tended, the simple physical rhythm of a life that kept the pump running. When that rhythm slows, the pump slows with it. The fluid accumulating in your ankles is not a sign of breakdown. It is the predictable result of a drainage system that stopped receiving the input it was designed to operate on. Your body is doing exactly what it was built to do. It has been waiting for the conditions it was built to require. Think about Renata on a Thursday morning, 6 weeks into the protocol. She went to the top shelf of her closet and took down the box she had packed away. The tan shoes with the low heel, the pair she had worn to her daughter's graduation, to her sister's birthday, to every occasion that had mattered in the last decade. She had put them away because by 5 p.m. they no longer fit, and she was tired of the reminder. She took them out, sat on the edge of the bed, put them on, laced them, stood up, walked 3 steps to the kitchen window. They fit. Not because something extraordinary happened in her body, because something ordinary was restored. The daily signaling that a drainage system built for movement needs in order to run. The physical independence she had been quietly losing, the shoes she could no longer wear, the walk she had started shortening, the ankles that felt like balloons by dinner, had not been taken from her by time. It had been interrupted by an explanation she was never given. She had the explanation now. If someone you love has been told their swollen ankles are simply a part of getting older, or has been on a water pill for months that has never quite resolved the problem, send them this video. They may have been treated for the right problem in the wrong system entirely. And you may be the first person to give them the explanation that makes everything finally make sense. Your body is not giving up. It is asking for the input it was built to receive.